Hello, and welcome to a bonus episode of Mortals and Portals. I am your host, Zach, and joining me is...
Adam.
Joel.
Taryn.
And is Ryan, here? Yeah, and Ryan. Yeah, Ryan's on vacation.
Here too.
Ryan's not here. Well, he's just on mute, and we didn't tell him, so he's just... no one can hear him. But anyway... this is a bonus episode of Mortals and Portals, so this is not an official episode. This is not a continuation of the campaign. Today, we're going to talk about Pathfinder and why we are using it, and we are going to describe the key differences between Pathfinder and D&D. So if you're a D&D player and you have no intention of playing Pathfinder, but you want to follow along with this podcast, we can explain some of the key differences. Because there's really not that many differences. There's a few that go a long way, but D&D, Pathfinder, they both exist using the same core system. So you could.
I thought you were just going to stop there.
They both exist.
They both exist. So here
any
we are.
questions? Yeah. Anyways, so we're gonna each talk about some of the things we like about it. It's kind of a discussion. It's a little informal. So first of all, I am going to tell you a brief little history about Pathfinder, and by brief I mean like a couple sentences. So, Pathfinder came about when D&D 4th edition launched because a lot of people didn't like 4th edition. They liked the previous version, D&D 3.5, which is a revision of D&D 3rd edition. So this company called Paizo came along. They had been doing things in the tabletop RPG space. A lot of them used to even work for Wizards of the Coast, D&D, and things like that. And they said, all right, we're going to take D&D 3.5, which everyone likes, since they're all mad at 4th edition right now, and capitalize on that. And we're going to expand and improve upon some of the rules and make a revision of 3.5. So it's very similar. And that's how Pathfinder 1st edition came to be. So just so you know, both D&D 5e and 1D&D or whatever they're making now, and Pathfinder 2nd edition, which is what we're playing, are all built upon the same foundation of D&D 3.5. So they're each only a couple editions removed from that, so they all share a very strong root, and they all obviously use the D20 system. So right away, if you are a D&D diehard, which is what I used to be, you couldn't pay me to try Pathfinder. I was like, I play D&D, I know all the rules, I love it, it does everything I want. Just know, even if you turn your nose up at Pathfinder, you're both basically playing the same game because they have the same core genetics, and yeah, it's very similar, so you should feel right at home hearing a lot of the terminology and rule sets and things like that. And turns out every single rule for Pathfinder 2nd edition is available for free on the Archives of Nethys website. So there is absolutely zero barrier to entry. And the character creator tool that we use called Path Builder is also available for free. So you can find all the rules and create a character for free. So I was like, hey guys, do you guys want to check out this game? And everyone was like, yeah, sure, let's check it out. And that led us on our Pathfinder journey. So we were all set up to make this podcast using D&D 5th edition, like for real. Like we even did a test session using 5th edition rules. We switched.
He actually said, do this or you're out.
Right.
Yeah, do it or you're out.
And it was like, it was like a week before we started recording, maybe.
Yes, that is actually correct. Side note, I actually accidentally spent an entire day reading 1st edition rules. So that confused me thoroughly. I was like, wait, what? Because the day before I read 2nd edition, so I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Anyway, learned it all. And then we all just started trying it. And now we want to explain to you why we love Pathfinder and some of the key differences. So I've been talking long enough. Does anyone want to, kick it off with one of their favorite differences between Pathfinder and D&D?
Well, I think probably the most obvious one, at least in my opinion, is the 3-action combat system.
Absolutely.
And I absolutely love it because most of the time it feels no different than D&D, but there's certain moments where had we been playing D&D, we'd be limited on what we can do in one single turn. For instance, let's say you're getting into a combat. Generally, you'll probably run up to an enemy and attack them, and then maybe you have a bonus action or a second attack or something that feels pretty much the same. the turn doesn't seem all that different. But once you're engaged with an enemy, had we been playing D&D, the next turn, if I had one attack, I could try to hit them. If I try to move at all, they get opportunity attack, or something like that.
You have
if
to
I only
spend
have one
your
attack,
action to disengage, and then you couldn't attack,
right.
things like
and
that.
then you couldn't, and then you couldn't attack. And then if I have one attack and I miss, sorry, that's my turn. Maybe I get them next time. But with this 3-action system, even if I'm already engaged, I could potentially attack 3 times, or I could attack once and come up with 2 other creative. It opens it up to more creativity and allows you to do more in combat, which I love.
Yeah, so quick rundown on that. Like what Adam's referring to is the 3-action economy. So in D&D, you'll have like an action per turn, a bonus action, a reaction, and your movement. And then what Pathfinder does is just calls basically all of those things in action and then gives you 3 of them. And you can spend them however you want. So if there's a turn where you don't have to move because you're a melee fighter and you're already up to the person you're attacking, you could spend all 3 actions attacking if you want. And the way they balance that is with each attack after the first attack, you take a -5 penalty. So you'll add all your modifiers, then -5. So basically, by the time you get to the 3rd action, you're minusing 10. So then it encourages you to do something even more creative with your 3rd action because you probably won't land your attack. So you can do all sorts of things like grapple, trip, shove, disarm, demoralize, which is like attempting to intimidate someone in combat. So it really just encourages a lot more diversity in combat, where in D&D you feel like you're wasting your turn if you don't attack. And I think, Taryn, you'd be a great person to talk about this because you're so, like, as you guys will see with Waltz in combat, he's all about improvising.
He's the master of this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot because I think you can even see in like episode 5 that I'm kind of editing right now. I really like looking for what I can do. So it's really cool to have like a search action. I still got to like attack in that encounter or in that like turn, and then I could like look more because like I didn't roll like the greatest on my first search. So it's a lot of fun to like be able to not just use my whole turn for a perception check. And then if I roll bad like I did the first, I couldn't do anything else. So instead of just rolling a perception check for my whole turn to get like a really good observation of like the battle and everything, I got to do that. Didn't roll that well, where normally it would have been over. I still got to attack, and then I got to try again to look for something a little bit more specific.
In D&D, like nobody ever is like, I'm going to spend a whole turn doing a perception check because they don't.
Right.
That just feels like a total waste because you only have one action. But Pathfinder accounts for that. There's an actual mechanic for scanning the battlefield and relaying information, things like that. So yeah, what's something else you guys have really been enjoying about Pathfinder?
I mean, the amount of classes. I mean, I know I picked a pretty boring combo. I picked a kobold rogue, which you could have done in D&D 5e, but there are, I don't know if Azarketes exist. I've never heard the name. I've never heard of that before, but there were pages of races and pages of classes, and then even within that, the amount of customization is ridiculous. Like, we're level 1, and I was able to pick a bunch. I felt like more... Like, as I was building it, I thought, surely I'm doing something wrong because I shouldn't be able to do this much stuff at level 1. But it's all true. Like, there is an insane amount of customization for your character.
Yeah, in D&D, a lot of times people will just skip straight to level 3 because, like,
I always
can
did.
barely do everything.
Yeah,
level 1 was boring.
But we were shocked when we were making our characters at level 1. It's like, you can do all that stuff at like level 1. So just you felt way, way more powerful, way more options. Sure. And yeah, Joel, that kind of segues into something that if Ryan wasn't on vacation, he would love to talk about. In fact, he asked me to talk about it. Is all of those character options. So Ryan is always someone that's had a very specific vision for what he wants his character to be like. And so in D&D, a lot of times we were working with archetypes. So you pick a class and then you pick an archetype. And then basically once you pick that archetype at level 3, it more or less locks you into a build all the way to level 20. You can pick different spells and things like that, but you're more or less on the same path. So when we were creating characters in D&D, hopefully there was an archetype template that matched his vision, and we'd have to do a lot of reflavoring. Sometimes I'd have to give him a magic item, and like we would just count that as some pseudo ability that he wanted to make his anime-esque character, but not count it as an item. You had to find sort of different ways to get in there. But in Pathfinder, I'm confident you can make a build that matches any vision you have. because they just do away with multi-classing and just like archetype template format. Basically what you do is you build your character, you pick your class, you have your basic class stuff, and you pick class feats. And these feats you pick can put you down an archetype, and then you can commit to that archetype for a bit and then pick a different feat and borrow from another archetype. And then you also get your ancestry feats and like your heritage and all these other things. So you can combine all these different branching paths and take little snippets from all these different things and create a character that incorporates things from all sorts of classes, all different types of archetypes, and so on. So the customization is next level. And that can be a lot if you haven't played tabletop RPGs, but if you're someone who's invested in like D&D and you've kind of always wanted a little more, or you feel like you've explored a lot of what it has to offer, this is like, it's just kind of groundbreaking. You're like, wow, now I can finally create all these ideas I've had and not feel like you're just making the same character as anyone else who picked the same archetype.
It's just satisfying when, you create a character in D&D and you're limited by what's there. So you just like add these bits of flavor that like either you're reskinning something or just kind of making like a new role almost. But when you're creating a character in Pathfinder, like you find so many things. There's like, this is exactly what I want for this character. And then it just makes it so much more real and less like, I don't know, like you're just making a ton of stuff up. And you know what I mean? Am I making any sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, because a lot of times you have to do all this sort of gymnastics and homebrew and all this, like as a DM, you have to make a lot of choices to try and accommodate what the player wants. Whereas in Pathfinder, there's actual support for it. There's like literally just so much tools for the GM. There's actual rules on if your player's like, I want to switch my class. There is rules for that. Obviously, you don't have to use them if you don't want to. You can homebrew whatever you want. But if you're someone that takes comfort in knowing you're using like the game system to justify like how you're doing things, that's all there as well. And then just another thing, we already kind of touched on this, but how do you guys feel like in terms of power as level 1 characters? Because obviously Pathfinder has greater modifiers and health and AC and things like that. So do you feel like more powerful as level 1 characters already?
Absolutely.
As level 1 for sure, yeah.
The modifier, like I don't have my character sheet in front of me, but okay, now I do. Like my thievery and my stealth gives me, or my reflex save gives me a +9 modifier, which wouldn't happen until like level 20. And like I don't know. I mean, I know it all shakes out in the end, but you're playing with bigger numbers, so it's more fun. Bigger number equals better, right?
It's just less like you feel when you're level 1 in D&D and you have some skill that you're supposed to be good at, and then you get like a +2 modifier, if that, at level 1. And then, some situation comes up where you're supposed to use that skill and everyone in the group knows you're the guy to do that. And then you roll really poorly and then you feel like an idiot.
Right.
It's just so unsatisfying to not be able to do the thing that you're supposed to be good at.
Right.
Yeah.
So these big modifiers help mitigate that, right? If you have a +9, it's going to be really hard to fail that check.
Yeah. And Joel, like you're saying, like, maybe it all washes out in the end. Actually, like they built the system in such a great way where really what that's doing is establishing greater disparity between you as someone who's trained in a skill and someone who is not. So in Pathfinder, like you can pick a skill and then you can become like a trained expert, master or legend or something like that. And each one of those levels will grant you greater bonuses. Plus, if you're at least trained in something, you always add your level to the roll. So for the guy who's supposed to be good at stealth, as he levels up, will always get to add at least one more every time he levels up, versus the person who's not trained in it can't do that. So there is an actual greater gap. So like what you guys are saying, we're in D&D, you'll add your proficiency bonus. So you could have like +2 dex and you're proficient, and now you get to roll a 5 to your stealth. And then someone who's +2 dex and not trained gets to run a +2. So you only have a gap of 3. But in Pathfinder, that gap between you and that person who's not trained is way higher. So you actually feel like you are better at these skills than they are. So you can build a more complementary party and feel like you excel at the things you invested your character in. And that goes for attack rolls and your AC. You add your levels to things you're trained in. So you really feel like your power scales, because in D&D, like your AC basically stays the same forever.
Right. Unless you get really good armor, yeah.
Yeah, so if you're level 20, the reason you survive fighting hordes of goblins is because they hit you a bunch and you have a lot of health. In Pathfinder, the reason you survive is because they cannot hit you because your AC is adding your level and you're a high level and they're a low level goblin. So you actually feel like you're this superior character.
I was just going to say, like, so just on my character sheet right now, and it's so cool for like your background, which like adds to the stats of your character and kind of gives you different like bonuses for, you know, things like society checks and stuff like that. Like I created a butcher, and it was so cool that they had butcher. They have like so many different ones, so you can find exactly what it was that like your character plays, and it like adds more flavor to how you play him too. It's like you already had this idea, and then there's rules or like ideas and things like reinforce exactly how you want to play your character, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned balance. So in the D&D community, there's a lot of talk about marshals being underpowered compared to spellcasters. And I feel like a lot of that's true because you get all these powerful spells, utility spells, and so on. And then usually the marshal can just run up and swing their sword at someone. But in Pathfinder, like if you're a marshal and you're supposed to excel at combat, you will. Like the fighter has an ability where they can just do a power attack endlessly. They have infinite uses of power attack. They can spend 2 attack actions into 1 attack, and if they hit, they get to double their damage dice automatically. And you're like, yeah, why wouldn't they be able to do that? They're literally a dedicated sword swinging fighter. They should be able to deal a lot of damage whenever they want, because obviously the wizard can go swing a sword too if they want. So why wouldn't the fighter be way better at doing that than the wizard?
So like all these changes that we've talked about, yes, some of them have been something that we have to remind ourselves or like learn, and you'll get to kind of listen to us figure those out as we go. But the majority of them different from D&D, but the core is the same. And so like, yes, our modifiers are higher, but that doesn't change how we do it. We're just adding more numbers to, you know, what we'd normally be doing in D&D. And like, so all these things, it's like the changes are great, but it feels so similar. I have to remind myself that we're playing Pathfinder instead of D&D.
Yeah, for sure.
Going from D&D to Pathfinder, not hard. So if you already know how to play D&D and you want to explore other stuff, it is not going to be hard for you to switch to Pathfinder. That's not hard.
I would imagine that DMs have the most to switch from. You know what I mean? Like as a player, it didn't feel very different
easy.
at all.
And I could definitely elaborate on that. Like as the DM going to GM for Pathfinder, yeah, not crazy. Like you understand a lot of the same concepts. They might address them differently, but just overall, like the amount of rule support Pathfinder gives you is insane. I just love it. And then the main one I want to talk about is encounter building. So in D&D, this is for my DMs out there, if you're building an encounter, you have something called challenge ratings in the monster manual. So if a monster has a challenge rating of 4, what that roughly means is a party of 4 level 4s should be able to beat this fairly easily if that's the only monster. And that's just about all the system actually tells you. So people have made tools online to help you a little bit more with that, but that's not supported by the actual rules of D&D. That's just people trying to sort out this horrible system. So what Pathfinder does is they give you an XP budget. So every level in Pathfinder has a distance of 1,000 XP. So there's no like level 2 to level 3 is harder to get than level 1 to level 2. Like it's not, it's just every time it's 1,000 XP. And then so the way the monsters work is the amount of XP they're worth is relative to your level. So they have a table and it's like if your party is this level and the monster is 2 levels less, then it's worth this much. 1 level less, this much. Same level, this much. 1 level more, this much. 2 levels, this much. And so on. And then you have an encounter table that says if you want to build a hard encounter, then you get this much XP to spend. So then you just look at your XP table and you look at the monsters and what level they are relative to the party, and you spend that XP until you hit the budget that you want to make the encounter difficulty you want. And I've tested it out. Like I think we've done about between our test sessions and our official episodes, like 5-ish combat encounters. Man, they've rung true. And that level of clarity is so helpful to me because as a DM in D&D, there's been a ton of times where it's like, I thought this would be easy, but they're all almost dead and I might kill everybody. Or I thought this would be really hard, but this guy has 1 hit point left. This is a joke encounter. So that alone, like I think is just a phenomenal tool set and just super refreshing that they actually took the time to figure this out for you, because they got to make things easy on the GM. The GM is like runs the game. If you make all your GMs mad, then nobody's going to run any games. So they're like, let's make this make sense. Right. So thank you, Paizo. Great system. Love
Hashtag not sponsored, but could be.
Okay.
We can talk.
Yeah. Oh, and then one other difference for you guys is how crits work. So in D&D, the only way to get a crit attack is you roll a nat 20, and that means you get to double your damage die in combat. And then what Pathfinder does is if you beat the DC, so the target you're rolling against, by 10 or more, then you critically succeed. So we're talking about higher modifiers. So as our players level up and they're fighting lower level things, they're going to be able to blow through their AC by 10, and they'll get a lot more crits. There's way more swings in combat, and that's what makes combat really fun, those dramatic swings that just bring all that energy and life to these encounters that are really fun. All right, and then the last thing I want to say before we go is I think Paizo is just an awesome company, like the way they've set this up, giving all their rules out for free. They just want you to play this game. They want you to try it. So yeah, just try it out. We love it. It's been a ton of fun. So yeah, we just wanted you to know the key differences so you can follow along if you're interested. And we also would encourage you to try it because it's super fun. And if you don't like it, you can just go back to D&D. So yeah, that's why we're playing Pathfinder. And that's why we love it. So thank you for joining us on that rant. And we'll see you next time, mortals.